Revealed in upcoming episodes of this program are the contents of a recently unearthed repository classified by the secret government, the Phenomenon Archives.
The sheer immensity of the blast at Tunguska has intimidated scientists and researchers for over 9 decades. Since the scientific know-how to cause an explosion of this magnitude was not within humanity's capability until decades after the event, man-made causes were ruled out early on. But there are matters that have come to light since the unearthing of the Phenomenon Archives, which should encourage scientists to revisit all possibilities.
Shortly after 7 a.m. on June 30th, 1908, in the cold vastness of central Siberia near the Tunguska River, farmers, herdsmen, and trappers watch in awe as a cylindrical object glowing with blinding white light and a fiery tail streaks across the morning horizon. The object is 6 to 10 kilometers above the ground, directly over a desolate region of tundra and pine forest. At 7:17, it explodes in a tremendous ball of fire, laying to waste over 2,000 square kilometers of Earth, equivalent to an area larger than Los Angeles. The resulting firestorms last for several weeks, burning an additional 10,000 kilometers surrounding the flashpoint. This explosion is felt several thousand kilometers away. Strangely, upon investigation of this location 19 years later, no impact crater of any kind is found, and no conclusive evidence is released from the site to enable scientists to determine what created this massive explosion. Until now.
At the time, Russia was going through a major transition. A revolutionary uprising occurred in 1905. It failed. But soon after, the Russians were to enter World War I, wherein 1,700,000 Russian lives were lost. Then the Tsar fell. The Bolsheviks took over, and, well, needless to say, no one was rushing up to Siberia to check out a bunch of knocked down trees and some sick farmers.
After 90 years of investigation of this crash site by thousands of scientists from Russia and dozens of other countries, there is still no consensus among scientists as to the identity of the object or its origin. Recently, thousands of participants in an international space convention held in Bologna, Italy, failed to grasp any further understanding or form any scientific consensus regarding the phenomenon.
Были определенные точности заданы, это минимально необходимые точности для того, заданы, это минимально необходимые.
Professor Envy Vasilyev, chairman of the Scientific Organizing Committee of the Russian Academy of Sciences, admits during this convention that the explosion is of a non-terrestrial object of still unknown origin, and that an unambiguous, comprehensive solution addressing all of the problems involved in a logical, scientific explanation is not achievable with the available evidence.
A group of scientists found the impact point, and they found something very interesting, namely a forest that for many square miles had been knocked down, and all the trees were pointing radially away from the impact point. And at the impact point was a great big hole in the ground. Now, what's interesting about it is nothing was found of whatever caused the impact. There is the forest torn down, there's the great big holes, and nothing else.
The available body of evidence both supports and contradicts all of the explanations previously put forward to account for the explosion. Conflicting evidence confounds many of the competing proposals. These range from the impact of an asteroid or comet to contact with antimatter particles, a mini black hole, or even a futuristic weapons discharge. Some evidence, apparently collected many years ago by Russian scientists, was confiscated and, without explanation, concealed by the Ministry of State Security, later to become known as the KGB. Now presented for the first time is an account of this mysterious explosion by one of the last surviving eyewitnesses. Exposed here are the fallacies in current scientific theories and explanations set forth to interpret what actually occurred in Tunguska on that fateful morning in 1908. A colonel in the former Soviet Union's KGB now admits to being an accessory to a covert Russian cover-up intended to suppress and conceal crucial evidence. His role in the government scheme to conceal the conclusions reached by many Russian scientists privy to the evidence gathered at Tunguska, that Tunguska actually bears the scars of an authentic 90-year-old crash site of an interplanetary spaceship of extraterrestrial origin. Considering the role taken by the Russian government in attempting to conceal the truth about this event, coupled with the virtual impossibility of explaining the explosion by any natural means, this occurrence seems frighteningly similar to the event occurring in 1947 in the United States near Roswell, New Mexico. With all the available evidence considered, Tunguska may well represent the equivalent of a Russian Roswell. Just prior to the Tunguska explosion in 1908, observatories and meteorologists around the world note a series of atmospheric oddities, including the formation and movement of unusual clouds, an unusually strong aurora borealis, and solar halos. No one is able to directly connect these atmospheric oddities with the Tunguska object. However, the coincidences in time between the sudden occurrence of these strange atmospheric activities followed by the explosion strongly suggest that they are connected in some way.
I was about 7 or 8 years old at the time I saw it with my father. We were farming in a little village near the railroad tracks, and I'll never forget how it looked like a long, round chimney on its side with a long tail of fire. I remember telling everybody I could that it looked at first like it was coming down, but then angled up for a little while, and then I was absolutely positive that it had changed its direction.
As many as 900 eyewitnesses living near the crash give similar accounts. Their stories consistently speak of an object that changes trajectory, maneuvering in a way that defies any logical scientific explanation of a naturally occurring event. It is physically impossible for a meteor or comet caught in the Earth's gravitational pull to change direction while falling through our atmosphere. Whatever the phenomenon may have been, it did not behave like any object known to nature.
It disappeared over the next mountain ridge. And I remember like it was yesterday, how a few seconds later it seemed like the entire world ended. There was a flash that filled the entire sky, and it was like the sky opened up and split in half. I put my hands over my eyes and I could see the bones in my hands.
Given the remoteness of the area, the onset of World War I, and the civil conflicts within Russia which result in the Communist Revolution, it is 1927 before an expedition is mounted to investigate the site of the Tunguska event. Upon arrival at the site, the members of this expedition are awestruck by the carnage and the extent of the devastation still evident 19 years after the explosion. Trees the size of telephone poles are snapped like toothpicks in a radial pattern away from the central point of the blast, splayed out like spokes on a bicycle wheel. Even so, no crater is discovered, and there are no traces of a large meteorite found in the vicinity. There are, however, many small metallic fragments embedded in the fallen trees. These are collected for analysis. Many people living near the explosion site reportedly die of an unknown illness, showing symptoms not previously known to the region.
I could not get over the fact that so many of my friends and family were getting sick, and many of them died when still young. They were healthy before, and I just could not figure out why they got sick and died.
900 kilometers from the blast, an observatory buried deep in Irkutsk, Siberia, records disturbances in the Earth's magnetic field, as well as several magnetic storms occurring at the same time, or just following the Tunguska event. These anomalies cannot be explained by any natural means. No basis for explaining either the explosion or the resulting abnormalities exist until after World War II. Then, following the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, aerial photographs of these cities are compared with aerial photographs of the Tunguska site. The photographs are surprisingly similar, with the notable exception that the Tunguska site is very much larger by comparison. Another stunning observation reveals that people living near the two bomb blasts in Japan experience identical symptoms of ill health to those in the vicinity of Tunguska. Many experts believe that the people who die of the strange illness near Tunguska lose their lives as a result of radiation poisoning.
Stalin узнал о случившемся между Тунгуской и Хиросима.
When Stalin found out about the similarities between Tunguska and Hiroshima, he went absolutely nuts. He thought it could have been some UFO testing a new weapon that he could make use of, or something that could be used against the Americans. Stalin just wanted to know what the hell went on out there, and for someone to sort all of that out.
In July of 1947, Joseph Stalin personally gives specific instructions to the head of the Ministry of State Security, later to become the KGB, to investigate Tunguska. He is to involve the world's foremost rocket scientist and designer, S.P. Korolev. Korolev later becomes the father of the Russian space program.
Sergei Korolev was a larger-than-life figure. In the late 50s and early 60s, he would change the face of world history by, among other things, sending the first manned rocket into space. Considering his stature with his peers, the position he would take on the Tunguska event would likely represent the final word on the subject. To the Supreme Soviet, the word of S.P. Korolev was as authentic as Russian vodka. But if they could have predicted his conclusions, they might have kept that vodka for themselves.
Once the Russians succeed in developing the technology to explode thermonuclear weapons, they conduct numerous test detonations high in the atmosphere. They find that these explosions produce disruptions in the Earth's magnetic field, resulting in geomagnetic storms. These storms produce readings that are identical to those recorded by the Irkutsk Observatory during and after the Tunguska explosion of 1908. Further evidence of a nuclear blast and residual radiation fallout is revealed some years later, when Russian scientists and experts find that virtually all of the trees at Tunguska undergo abnormal accelerated growth for years subsequent to the blast. This is scientifically proven to be the result of genetic mutation caused by radiation exposure. Korolev himself equips an expedition to investigate the explosion site at Tunguska. By the late 1950s, a number of expeditions confirm finding residual traces of radiation throughout the blast region. A mystified